In just 2 weeks since his return, quarterback Phil Jurkovec has made quite the impression. We're going to look at his future on today's Locked On Boston College.
You are Locked On Boston College, your daily podcast on the Boston College Eagles, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Boston College. I am your host, AJ Black. I am the editor and publisher of BC Bulletin. Make sure you check out my work at bcbulletin.com. On today's show, we're going to look at Phil Jurkovec and what he could do over the next 2 weeks and what the future may hold for the Boston College Signal Caller. And then we're going to look at some of the other games from this past weekend. We'll look at those with Mitch Wolfe. So Phil Jurkovec on Monday was named the ACC Quarterback of the Week by the conference. He was also named Pro Football Focus's Quarterback of the Week through the entire country. And all the accolades were starting to pile up. He was also Mitch Wolfe's 3 stars. And a bunch of bigger writers also saw that as well and kind of chimed in. John Garcia of SI All-American said this was the type of performance we have been expecting from Phil Jurkovec and have to have NFL GMs starting to pay attention. So there's 2 more games. You have Florida State, you have Wake Forest. 2 teams that honestly their defenses are not really all that great. I mean, Florida State has made some improvements on their defense. Wake Forest's defense is not very good. So what could happen for Phil Jurkovec over these last 2 weeks, and where will it send him? So, he has already in one game made himself into the conversation of the best in the ACC. I know Kenny Pickett has stats, and Sam Howell has stats. Sam Hartman has picked up wins. Devin Leary has done well. But Jurkovec, when you have 5 touchdowns like that, when you effortlessly move the ball up and down the field with both your legs and with your arm, it really does make you consider, is he as good as these other quarterbacks? And when you look at that, like the piece that comes up, and I know people don't want to talk about it, but it's worth looking at, is will he come back in 2022? I mean, we're already talking about that. And it's a good question to ask because it's hard to read. Now, if he had stayed out and said maybe made one more appearance, this year, maybe a bowl game and the Wake Forest game, he definitely would be coming back in 2022. There's no way an NFL team would draft him with that many injuries. He had 2 last year, this one this year, and not enough film on game tape. But now he's got a chance to put together a package that could start to maybe open some eyes from scouts across the NFL. So say he goes out against Florida State and he throws 4 touchdowns and 300 yards. And then he goes against Wake Forest and he has 5 more touchdowns. And then because they're BC and they're 8-4, they get like a mid-level bowl and they play an AAC team, like Houston or Toledo or something like that. And he throws for 4 more touchdowns. That gives him about 20 touchdowns over the last month. Is that enough to get NFL staff to go, he could be, one of the top 3 or 4 quarterbacks? I mean, this is a very, very weak quarterback class. I mean, if you were a team, what quarterback would you say, this is a can't-miss quarterback? Sam Howell? He's not that. Kenny Pickett, I mean, he's doing great, but he's not that either. Carson Strong, Malik Willis, they're good quarterbacks, but they're not the Trevor Lawrence, the Justin Fields, or the Mac Joneses of last year. They don't have that. So if Phil Jurkovec goes out there and he lights it up and gets BC fans excited, there's always the possibility that he sees this and he gets somebody who talks to him and says, hey, Phil, you could be a first-round draft pick if you do have a good combine, which he will. Mitch Wolfe said that during Monday's show. So I don't want to drown on your parade because I still don't think it's a foregone conclusion. I honestly think he's still going to come back because he, even if he has a strong end of the season, I still think he's only going to go 2nd or 3rd round. If he comes back and has a full season playing like he's doing now, he could get into the Heisman conversation. He could be Davey O'Brien quarterback of the year. He could make BC a national name. He could make himself a national name, and that could mean big money. I mean, there's a big money difference between 1st and 2nd rounds of quarterbacks. So I still think he's going to do it, but unfortunately for Boston College fans out there, we're going to have to sweat it out until the end of the season because I'm sure he's going to keep that close to his vest. Same thing with Zay Flowers, though, too. But we're going to talk a little bit about some of the other games around the country. We'll look at the ACC with Mitch Wolfe, and then we'll look at some of our friends that we like to have a little fun with here on Locked On ACC. Locked On Boston College. And this is it. The putt to win the tournament. If you sink it, the championship is yours. But on your backswing, your hat falls over your eyes. Is this how you're running your business? Poor visibility because you're relying on spreadsheets and outdated finance software? To see the full picture, you need to upgrade to NetSuite by Oracle. NetSuite is the #1 cloud financial system to power your growth. With visibility and control of your financials, inventory, HR planning, budgeting, and more, NetSuite is everything you need to grow all in one place. It's got everything. With NetSuite, you can automate your processes and close your books in no time while staying well ahead of the competition. If you're running a business, that is so important. 93% of surveyed businesses increase their visibility and control after upgrading to NetSuite. Over 27,000 businesses already use NetSuite, and right now, through the end of the year, NetSuite is offering a one-of-a-kind financing program to those ready to upgrade at netsuite.com/LockedOnNCAA. Again, head to netsuite.com/LockedOnNCAA for special end-of-year financing on the #1 financial system for growing businesses. netsuite.com/NCAA. All right, college football fanatics, have you heard about PrizePicks? PrizePicks is a daily fantasy made easy. I love this, and I know you will too. PrizePicks is a leader in college sports daily fantasy. They offer more college football props than anyone in the world, and offer all the star players of the Power 5 as well as mid-major players you may not even have heard of. They offer you anything you can think of, from yards to touchdowns, even interceptions thrown. I love going on PrizePicks. You can go to the app, super easy. You can go to the different sports and find whatever over/under that you want, and then you can have some fun. And that's the genius of PrizePicks. Is there's infinite amounts of configurations. It's as infinite as your mind can go. Now, PrizePicks allows mixed sports entries. You could take LeBron James with the under on Pat Mahomes in the same entry. Now, they have a special deal, and you got to check this out. If you use promo code LOCKEDON, they're going to give you a 100% deposit match up to $100. Just head on over to PrizePicks and make that deposit today. Use the award-winning app on both the App Store and Google Play. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It's that easy. PrizePicks is safe and offers fast withdrawal. Remember, the promo code is LOCKEDON. PrizePicks is daily fantasy made easy. This is Locked On Boston College. AJ Black here. We're with Mitch Wolfe, who joins us every Tuesday to talk about all the games that went on during the weekend. We already talked about BC with Mitch on our Monday show. If you've not checked that out, make sure you head back there. But this is our chance to dive around the ACC, look at some of the other big games this weekend. There was a big Oklahoma one we'll talk about, and some of our friends and getting into the Schadenfreude with some of our local other programs and ex-coaches. So Mitch, let's first jump into the ACC. Any games that specifically jumped out to you?
So the one that I enjoyed was actually the Thursday game, which was North Carolina against Pittsburgh. And, Pitt gets out to an early lead behind Kenny Pickett, having another excellent game as a thrower. And then North Carolina battles their way back slowly. And then the rain starts driving down. You get these funny pictures of Mac Brown standing in the pouring rain in his camo hoodie, just looking miserable. Yep. But Pitt gets a late overtime win. It's funny because my mom texted me about the two quarterbacks, and I was like, yeah, Pickett's good, but Sam Howell's going to go higher. And she's like, why? I'm like, well, X, Y, and Z, blah, blah, blah. But she's like, yeah, that doesn't make a lot of sense. I'm like, I get it, but it's just one game. But that was a really fun back and forth game to watch.
And UNC, they kind of blew that at the end. They had the ball, I think, at the 5-yard line with a minute or so left, and they couldn't get it in.
Yeah, they did. That was, there again, I thought a lot of the hype around them going into the preseason was a little overblown because of how much offensive production they were losing, and their defense still wasn't that good. But I mean, them sitting at 5-5 right now is kind of surprising, but I still think they'll probably get to a bowl game this season.
Yep. And for me, the big game this weekend was, of course, Clemson and UConn. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a couple other good ones. One I have to admit I did not watch, which was Florida State and Miami. And then I stayed up for Wake Forest and NC State, but fell asleep in the last quarter.
Yeah, I was trying to make it through that one, but I had been up early to tailgate the Ohio State Purdue game, so I was pretty exhausted. But I mean, honestly, that was such a weird game because you had all the quarterbacks just throwing interceptions back and forth. I mean, I was half awake and I didn't see the ending, but I mean, based on the box score, Devin Leary had an awesome game throwing the football, but I mean, Sam Hartman threw three touchdowns, but he had 3 picks, and there were just a lot of bad interceptions from him. So I think the funny thing, though, was they showed this graphic of, him throwing at A.T. Perry, who's their big, I think he's like 6'5" or something. He's a big receiver for them. And he had like 24 targets at some point, and I don't know what that ended up being because he had 5 receptions, but they were just throwing the ball at him repeatedly, and he just could not come down with a reception consistently in the game, which was pretty funny to watch. I'm going to see if I can, what was his final target number? We're going to go. Sorry, I need to. I'm diving into stats. Go ahead. Yeah, you can buy time.
Interesting. While you're doing that, I was reading on Twitter, Kelvin Harmon, a former NC State wide receiver, says that he said Devin Leary is far and away the best quarterback in the ACC. Do you agree with that right now?
So before I get into that, 19 targets for A.T. Perry, 5 catches at a 26% catch rate. Devin Leary, the best quarterback in the ACC. I would have to disagree. And again, it usually depends on what measure you're taking. And I thought he had a great game yesterday, but obviously we've seen the Wake Forest defense is not very good at all. I think at this point, I'd still have to say it's Kenny Pickett. Every game he's lighting it up for them. They weren't able to, every time they've lost, he's had great numbers. So like, they're not losing because of him. Like he's throwing the ball all over the field. He's kind of experiencing like a Joe Burrow level rise because, Burrow, like when he was going into his great season before, everybody was like, oh yeah, he's like, okay, like he's got some stuff. And then he just comes out of nowhere and is like one of the best quarterbacks ever. And I don't think Pickett's there just because it's not on as good of a team as that LSU team, but he's kind of experiencing that same thing. Sam Howell's going to be drafted higher. I think Devin Leary is good. Like he's an underrated quarterback nationally, but I'd be hard pressed to agree that he's the best quarterback in the ACC. I'd say he's definitely in the top half, but definitely not the best.
Okay, excellent. And any other ACC games you want to talk about? I had to say we always talk about UConn. That game I turned on and immediately saw UConn score a touchdown and almost spit my water everywhere. I wasn't drinking beer because I had to cover BC later, but then they proceeded to do literally nothing for the rest of the game. And that was another loss for the Huskies, who, let's talk about it, Mitch, have their new head coach, Jim Mora Jr. What are your thoughts on this hire?
Yeah, hey, UConn covered. I think the spread was 40, so they only lost by 37. So props to them. And I think it was funny because at some point, like UConn was beating Clemson 7-0 and New Mexico State was beating Bama 3-0. So people were like, oh my God, what's happening? But yeah, that's an interesting hire for them. I feel like typically when colleges try to bring in, kind of an NFL lifer to run their program, it usually doesn't end well. This is anecdotal, but I just feel like that usually doesn't go super well. But if you're UConn, at this point, you're willing to try anything. You're desperate to, save anything, salvage anything of this dumpster fire of a football program.
Yeah. And I have to say right off the bat, Jim Mora worked with SI. So he was part of he did videos for us for like a hot second during, I think, NFL draft season. I didn't get to talk to him specifically, but if you see a lot of people loving him, it's usually because they met him through that. I should say that. But the other piece, the guy flamed out at UCLA and, he flamed out with the Falcons. You're going to a program, you're an older coach that you're going to a program that has done nothing for a better part of 15 years now and have no future because they're kind of listless. I don't know. I don't see him doing, like, I saw people worrying that he's going to out recruit BC or starts poaching recruits from BC. And I was like, yo, hold on a second here. I'm not going to be a homer here, but literally any recruit in New England that BC wants that is battling between them and UConn, BC is going to get every single one of them.
Yeah. Barring the kid, like being from Stores and, having a super like close, like familial relationship with UConn. I just don't get that at all. I don't really know what UConn's facilities are like. I can't imagine they're near BC's given the recent investment in that. Again, they're not really playing a conference schedule. They're just getting beat. They're kind of going. They're much closer to UMass right now than they are BC. Obviously, UMass beat them. But we'll whip around more of the ACC. I did catch a bit of the Miami Florida State game at the end, and Miami's been hot recently, so it's kind of. I do kind of feel happy for Florida State that they're again starting to move at least a little in the right direction. They're coming up to BC this upcoming week, so I feel good about BC's chances. But it's good that Florida State is at least putting the pieces back together after kind of being in shambles for the last 5 years or so.
Yeah, and I have a tendency to rip on a lot of coaches. I'm not a big Dino Babers fan. I don't like Justin Fuente at all. But I think Mike Norvell is a good fit for them. And I know,
and he had a rough like first years. Like obviously the first year like just was bad, and then COVID stuff like with his players and them not seeming to have a great relationship with him over various stuff. And then he gets COVID and just kind of like everything that could go wrong did go wrong down there. So it is nice to see him starting to actually get it turned around based on his system and everything.
All right. So top 25 games. Was there any top 25 games you wanted to talk about, Mitch?
I mean, so like I said, I was at the Ohio State Purdue game, and Ohio State is really good. This was probably their most complete game in a while. Offense was clicking. Purdue didn't really score much until kind of they scored their 2 touchdowns in the second half, and that made it seem closer than it really was. But Ohio State got out to a really early lead and just never gave it up. So we had some kind of weird games. I mean, Michigan beating Penn State on the road, that makes me happy just because I hate Penn State. You got Baylor with a upset win over Oklahoma, which is interesting just because obviously Oklahoma has looked defeatable in the last few weeks. They've been very inconsistent. They almost lost to Kansas. We'll come back to that. And they benched Caleb Williams. They brought back Spencer Rattler, and then Lincoln Riley was getting mad about Baylor kicking a late field goal and then Dave Aranda said it was because of Big 12 standings. But I just think that, if you're Lincoln Riley, I think you have more pressing problems than a garbage time field goal.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think obviously the biggest story in college football this week is Kansas beating Texas in overtime. Even though that's not a top 25 matchup, there's been talk of Texas being back for the last, 5-8 years or so. And now they're lost to arguably the worst Power 5 program in the country right now. And props to Lance Leipold, who came over from Buffalo pretty late after the whole Les Miles debacle. And I'm not saying he's got Kansas turned around, but getting that big win on the road against, a powerful conference opponent, that's great for that program.
It was a good hire. I thought that was a great hire when they hired him. I thought Leopold's a good, you get a young guy like that has a good pedigree and can do some things. He can lift up a program.
Yeah. And it's funny because it was a pretty late hire just because of how the timeline worked with all that. And a lot of people were like, why would you go, Buffalo's a good MAC school. Why would you go to this is kind of maybe why people question why would you go to UConn? Why would you go to Kansas? It's a completely moribund program, but he is a really good coach. He's been able to get a lot of good talent at Buffalo when he was there and turn them into NFL caliber players. So he is a guy that's definitely doing things the right way. And that is good to see. I'm not sure Kansas is going to get back to an Orange Bowl like they did in 2007 or 2008, but it's nice to see them not be a complete doormat that, did upset BC 2 years ago.
In a moment, Mitch and I are going to talk about a couple more games and wrap up our today's show. But we're back and better than ever. A new web interface for the start of the basketball season and more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline remains your number one spot for all the basketball and football action this season. Head over to our new updated desktop and mobile device website to sign up today and receive a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Just use your promo code LOCKEDON to receive your bonus. I was using BetOnline this weekend. I hit with BC on the under. Eric Hoffs has told me to fade on go with the under on BC for the entire season. See how you do. You would have been 2 out of 3 so far with BC on Sunday. They did not. They went over. But that, and I went with the money line on BC against Georgia Tech. Did really well for myself on BetOnline. From basketball, football, baseball, postseason, NHL, boxing, and UFC, right to your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all your amazing offers available for the 21 season. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports. BetOnline, where the game starts. This is Locked on Boston College. AJ Black here. We are with Mitch Wolfe, and we're talking about some of the games around the country. And we're going to start talking about some of the teams that we love to talk about because it gives us a little warm feeling when we bash them. We already bashed UConn, so that one's already out of the way. Let's talk about UMass, who did the unthinkable. They lost their second straight. I think that this is their second FCS loss this year, isn't it?
That's correct. Second consecutive. Yeah.
They lost to URI last week, which led to Walt Bell getting fired, and they got smoked by Maine on Saturday.
Yeah, this is not good because UMass gets out to a 10-0 lead in the first quarter, and then Maine rattles off 35 unanswered to end, and that's just terrible. There's really nothing else you can say about it. I really don't know what direction UMass is going to go in the future. I'm wondering if they will be able to lure Holy Cross's head coach from the FCS, but I think I don't know if that's really likely either. I think we talked about him for the UConn job, but
Yep.
that at least has, a little, they're both independent programs. UConn has a little bit of a better history. So I don't know if he would make that jump from FCS just to go to UMass.
And if you're on Twitter and you follow me at AJ_BC, you would have saw the unthinkable this week where I actually defended UMass on Twitter. And I think, and I got lots of memes. I got the bad guy makes a good point meme for me. Worst person ever.
When they just post the stock photo of that guy from the Onion article, that just always hits for me because everybody now on Twitter now knows exactly what that means, and I love it.
I'll retweet it so you can see it because I took that as a badge of honor that the UMass fans thought of me as the worst person alive, but I defended him because the Globe did what they usually do to BC, which is, why does UMass have an FBS program? They should drop down. They're a waste of time. They're a waste of money, blah, 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 which you could copy and paste BC to that for the last 10 years. And if you're a BC fan in the Boston area, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Bob Holer from the Globe, and I'll call him out, Dan Shaughnessy, Buckley, Steve Buckley. They've all written these hack job, nasty posts about Boston College. I'm going in on this. And
yeah, I know Shaughnessy loves to trot that one out until BC beats his beloved Holy Cross, 70-10 or whatever it was from a few years ago.
And the basketball team just beat the snot out of his basketball team. So
there we go.
Yeah. So I get UMass's angst about that because they're just doing the same thing. And I know UMass is in a different spot. I get they stink. And believe me, just turn back the podcast for the last, we're on episode 250. I'm sure you can find about 30% of these in which I rip UMass. But I still think they deserve to be an FBS school, and the FBS program that they have does support the other programs they have on campus. And they do, the Olympic sports, the women's sports, the ones that don't make money. So even though they stink and they're terrible, and I will say that again, the UMass football team is terrible. They still do a lot of good, and they deserve to be in the FBS. That's
right. And I think the issue is, I think I would disagree that I think that they shouldn't be an FBS program, but that's more on the decision to jump up from FCS, whenever that was 8 years ago. But once you have made that decision, there's really no going back because like you said, it's really about the money. And I think when The Athletic did their article kind of previewing candidates for the job, they're saying listen, a lot of people will think going the FCS is the answer, and you really just can't do that from a financial or fiscal standpoint. That's just not realistic anymore. So that's really the reason why I think, obviously from a football on-field product standpoint, yeah, they should be an FCS team, but from a money standpoint, you just can't do that. And
and they're a program that's getting ripped because the group of 5 program conferences, they're all doing reconstructing and refiguring their lineups. And UMass and UConn are not a part of any of those conversations. UMass especially. UConn, I've heard a little buzz here and there. But
yeah, UConn got some Conference USA buzz, but I think that they're moving on without them for now. So that's interesting.
And so that's our talk about UMass. And I promise you, I probably will never, though I had a Brittany Collins, who was a UMass tennis player, on talking about NIL stuff before, but I promise you, I will not be positive about UMass again for a while. All right. Speaking of being positive, let's talk about Steve Addazio.
Here we go.
So Mitch, I had been sending these Eric Hofstas, our Friday guest, you got to follow him at EJ Hofstas every Saturday after. I swear to God, he stays up to listen to Steve Addazio's press conference, and he finds the best nuggets. And here's our nugget from Saturday's game. If you closed your eyes, and I did not tell you that was Colorado State, you would think that was literally the same thing he said in 2018 or 2019 at BC. Am I right, Mitch?
Yeah, absolutely. When I was watching that, and obviously now he doesn't have the mustache, but I had to really stare because I was like, it looks like it's just spontaneously growing back, or it might just be a mirage or something. But yeah, they lose to Air. And I'll say this, Air Force is a good team. They're playing really well right now this season. So, props to them, but Colorado State was really never in this game, losing 35-21. They're sitting at 3-7 right now. And like you said, he's really just trotting out all the same excuses, doing the fake thing where he kind of takes accountability, but really is just throwing his players under the bus. And I just don't really get what they're doing there moving forward. I think, I'm not sure if it was Eric the one that mentioned it, but them losing to Wyoming last week, that's apparently a pretty big rivalry out there. So that's a bad loss for them moving forward. So I just really don't foresee a world where he gets this turned around and they retain him, because I just don't get what they're doing. Like there's no forward momentum. There's no real, I don't think there really is a future vision with him at that program. So I think honestly,
and Colorado State's not a bad program. Like you can
absolutely not.
You can get a nice, good young coach in there. Like
and then that's like you can recruit that area. That's a pretty good fertile area for recruits, especially if you can get into Utah and Arizona, getting some of the players out of those states, because they have some talent there. So yeah, I mean, you can absolutely like put together some nice teams at Colorado State. That's a cool area. It's a neat little stadium. You're got a conference that has a good amount of turnover. So like pretty much any given year, you might be able to make a run at it. So, and he's got some good players. Like we talked about Trey McBride, David Bailey's there. He's had some good games, but I just, every Steve Addazio tenure just ends pretty much the same way. So, I don't really try to wish ill on people, but I think it's really just time for Colorado State to, face facts and realize they need to go in a different direction.
I just love the difference in the tenor of his press conferences versus Hafley's. And I know it's Hafley's winning more now, and Addazio clearly is not, but it didn't really matter. Listening, Addazio looks like I remember being in some of these press conferences where he's like drilling holes and like he's being like the bully to the media when he's talking to them. He's just being a jerk. And you can see it. Like if you watch Eric's clip of it, if you're a media member, you can see like, he's just like, he doesn't want to answer questions. He's being belligerent with you. And you don't get any of that with Hafley. And that's his way of kind of molding the media a little bit, but you appreciate that. Like you don't dread having to go to a press conference, because even when he had crappy games and when, during the Grossell era, when things were not going well, you could tell he's pissed off, but he wasn't being a jerk about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Like, and like, that's the difference is like, I think Hafley is able to realize, and this should be a simple realization, that it's not the media's fault that, they have a job to ask them these questions, and it's not this big conspiracy people have to get to. But like every time people ask Addazio a tough question, like it seems like he's going to like stand up and say like, all right, buddy, let's take this outside. We're going to settle this like men, settle this like a bunch of dudes. But I like to think that Eric has like this set up like in a study where like he opens up like a box, and it's like a nice good wood box, and like some smoke comes out. And then there's just this laptop with just videos of Addazio press conferences queued up, and he pours himself a nice glass of whiskey or something and just sits back and just watches the playlist go as Addazio, prattles on about his injuries and his lack of depth and what have you.
Oh, I'm sure he does. and our last little game, and I'm not even going to get into it, but if you're a BC fan, you may forget that Frank Spaziani is still coaching.
This is news to me.
He is the defensive coordinator at New Mexico State, where Doug Martin, his offensive coordinator from 2012, is still the head coach.
Doug Martin's still the head coach at New Mexico State?
I believe he is.
Good for him. Oh, though that's funny because my friend told me about this sound clip where the head coach, the head coach of New Mexico State said something about Bama this week, where he said, he's like, oh, like the only reason Alabama's ranked that high is because their logo, like any other team wouldn't rank that high. I was like, I respect that so much. Him just coming to Alabama for no reason when he knows he's going to get absolutely boat raced. That's awesome. He is still the coach there. Holy crap. That's incredible. Good for him.
His record there is 24-72. How he still has a job is amazing. But for those who missed Spaziani, they lost 59-3 to Alabama on Saturday. So
they almost covered. I think the spread was like 52, so they were close.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Maybe he's got a great ranch out in New Mexico. Just like, I mean, maybe Addazio has a great place. Fort Collins is awesome. I don't know if you've been there before. Colorado is awesome just in general. So if it's a great job if you can get it. So Mitch, where can people find you on social media?
You can find me at Mitchell T. Wolfe, WOLFE on Twitter. Like I said, we'll have by 3 Stars article should be out by now. And like I said, that analysis of Phil Jurkovec's passes should be coming. Sorry, Jurkovec.
There you go. Nailed it.
Got it. All right. There we go. Jurkovec, his passing analysis should be coming out sometime this week soon.
All right. And thank you, Mitch, for joining. You can follow me on Twitter at AJBlack_BC or Locked On BC. On tomorrow's show, we're going to be joined by Davis Scully. He is Rhodey Rampage on Twitter. He was an editor of a URI blog for a long time. He was one of my best friends, and he is a humongous URI follower and knows everything about the program. He's going to talk about URI as we get ready for the BC URI game on Wednesday. Thank you all, and see you again soon. Take care.